Hello, I'm Chicago's Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and I'm excited to welcome you to the Chicago premiere of A Most Beautiful Thing, a film that will fill you with inspiration and hope. I want to give a special thank you to Representative Danny Davis, Executive Producer Chaz, Ebert, Comcast, NBC Universal, the Chicago Film Office, and the Chicago International Film Festival for putting this very special event together. A Most Beautiful Thing shines a long overdue spotlight on the brilliance of our city's Black community, highlighting America's first African-American high school rowing team. The team of Arshay Cooper, Alvin Ross, Preston Granberry, Malcolm Hawkins, and Pookie Hawkins, extraordinary young men from the city's west side, tell a story familiar to far too many Chicagoans. One that reveals the lasting impacts of intergenerational trauma and an environment tarnished by systemic poverty and violence. However, despite the deck being stacked against them, these young men were able to support each other and form a lasting bond through their shared love of rowing, which empowered them to reimagine a different future for themselves. One away from the rival gang affiliations that sought to tear them apart, finding safety on the water and a more positive path where they could rechart the entire course of their lives. A Most Beautiful Thing is the feel-good film we all need right now, especially as our city's under-resourced communities grapple with the impacts of COVID-19 and gun violence. This is a film that showcases the strength and dedication of our people, that reminds us that our environment doesn't determine our future, and urges us to find community to initiate collective healing. Thank you, enjoy, and be safe.
What's up, everybody? This is Dwyane Wade. Listen, guys, I am bummed that I cannot be there with you guys tonight. This film is important. It's an excellent story. It's an amazing story. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank my brothers for allowing myself, for allowing Common, and for allowing Green Hill to put our names on this project. It's you guys' story. Y'all told it incredible. And I'm a fan, man. I'm a fan of what you guys accomplished and what you guys did and what y'all stand for. So unfortunately, I cannot be there with you guys. I'm in Atlanta right now. I'm shooting an important show out here called The Arena. But the most beautiful thing, it's important. It was important then. And it's important now that stories like these be told and have a light shined on them, you know, for our community, for the Black community. So you guys keep going, y'all keep doing y'all thing, and I'm proud. I'm proud to be a part of it. So shout out to my brothers Common and Grant Hill. Love you guys and all the other executive producers, everybody that allowed us in the door to support this film. We thank you. Enjoy, guys.
Hello. My name is Chaz Ebert of RogerEbert.com and the Roger and Chaz Ebert Foundation. I am so happy to invite you to this event today. It's to me, one of the most important events that could take place because this movie, A Most Beautiful Thing, answers actually a lot of questions that are going on in our society today. I think that one day we're going to look back and we're going to say, that at the time of the coronavirus pandemic, at the time of the reawakening of civil rights events, that A Most Beautiful Thing offered some answers, not all the answers, but some answers. And I think that you'll see what the panelists, we have a very esteemed panel of guests today. And I'd like to start by introducing Brandon Jones. He is the Manager of Customer Experience on behalf of Comcast, NBC Universal.
Thank you, Chaz. And may I extend my thanks to Mayor Lightfoot, 50 Eggs, Chaz Ebert, and everyone who worked to make this film an event. It is my honor to welcome you on behalf of Comcast, NBC Universal. We could not be prouder to join the Chicago International Film Festival and the Chicago Film Office to bring you this special event. I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation. At Comcast NBC Universal, we believe in and we practice diversity, inclusion, and equity. That philosophy starts with our chairman, Brian Roberts, who recently announced the company's multi-year $100 million commitment to sustain action centered on social justice, education, digital equity, and small business opportunity. That announcement is the latest in our long-standing commitment to D&I. A year in 2019, 62% of our employees were women or people of color. Since 2010, we spent over $22.7 billion with diverse businesses, including some of our very own Chicago partners, such as WVN and Midway Broadcasting. Shout out to Melanie and Pierre. We also champion numerous employee resource groups across Chicago and nationally. In fact, in addition to my day-to-day role as manager on our Greater Chicago Customer Experience team, I served as co-lead of Comcast Black Employee Network, or BEN, consisting of more than 900 members across Greater Chicago who support, uplift, and advance one another. I couldn't be more proud of the work that BEN has been doing during these difficult times to foster unity among our members and allies in Greater Chicago. The incredible support and leadership within our BEN community keeps us centered, and I cannot be more appreciative to work with a company that celebrates the Black cultural experience. And turning to programming, in 2013, we launched Comcast NBC Universal's Voices of the Civil Rights Movement platform, free to the general public. Voices presents historical narratives and compelling firsthand accounts, including Chicago's own Reverend Jesse Jackson, Tamil Black, and Josie Childs, as well as the late Reverend C.T. Vivian and Congressman John Lewis, some of my personal heroes. Voices has a permanent home at the DuSable Museum of African American History and Culture, and is a part of, Voices has a permanent home at the DuSable Museum and is a part of 11,000 total hours of diverse programming available on Xfinity On Demand. We at Comcast NBC Universal are proud to help bring you this hometown story of Arshay, Alvin, Preston, Ray, and Malcolm. As a West Side native, proudly from the North Lawndale neighborhood, and an even prouder graduate of Bogan Computer Technical High School, these men are an inspiration. Their story is a reminder of the strength we can find in one another when we rally around a common cause and set our focus on propelling through the roughest currents. Before I wrap, I'm thrilled to share that next Friday, July 31st, A Most Beautiful Thing will premiere on Comcast Xfinity On Demand. We hope you'll spread the word to your friends and neighbors. Share this incredible story widely. Thanks for taking part in this special event. On behalf of Comcast NBC Universal, enjoy the discussion. Back to you.
Hello, thank you, Brandon. I also am a native of the West Side of Chicago. I was born on the West Side. I lived there for many years. I care deeply about what happens to this city. That's why when I saw Mary Mazzio's film as it was in the making, I decided that I wanted to come on as an executive producer to see what I could do to help in any way I can. And I also am a big fan of our mayor, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and I want to help her do whatever we can do because our future depends on helping and showing a path for all of the children of Chicago, on the West Side, on the South Side, everywhere. Right now, I'd like to introduce the director of the Chicago Film Office. He's from the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, Kwame Amoaku. Microphone.
Got it. Hello, I'm Kwame Amoaku, the director of the Chicago Film Office. On behalf of the City of Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, and Commissioner Mark Kelly, I'd like to welcome you to this very special virtual premiere of the film A Most Beautiful Thing. Thank you 50 Eggs, Chaz Ebert, Chicago International Film Festival, and Comcast for providing us with this wonderful experience. During this unprecedented time when we are bombarded with negative images and information, it is truly a blessing to take time to enjoy a film that illustrates that adversity can be overcome with the human spirit when it's nurtured, and that human spirit can be a powerful force for change. It was one photography class in high school that changed the trajectory of my entire life and took a kid from the projects and provided him with a career in the film industry for over 25 years. The Chicago Film Office is dedicated to providing opportunities like that for children from underserved areas in the city of Chicago, not only to bring them into the workforce of the film production industry, but to create content creators that can tell stories beyond the media images that have been provided and give their own accounting of their own lives and tell their own stories. This film is an inspiration and a reflection of the infinite possibilities that exist within our youth if we could just believe in them and give them opportunities. Thank you very much and enjoy the film.
And now I'd like to introduce from the Chicago International Film Festival, Mimi Plache.
Thank you, Chaz. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Mimi Plache, as Chaz mentioned, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Chicago International Film Festival. And on behalf of the festival, it's my great honor to be co-presenting this film with 50 Eggs Productions, the Chicago Film Office, and Comcast NBC Universal. Since Monday, when the link first went live to our invited audiences, the festival has received an overwhelmingly positive response from viewers and film lovers who have commented on how powerful, touching, and relevant the film is. I had people who, as soon as they finished watching it, had to reach out by email or text to tell me how much they were inspired and moved by the film. The Chicago International Film Festival has long believed in the power of film to move us, to bring people together, to change the way that we see the world, and to introduce us to new perspectives and ways of thinking. And I feel a most beautiful thing is a really beautiful testament to this power of film. I wanted to congratulate Director Mary Mazzio and her production team on the film, and also thank all of our panelists for joining us here today to talk about the impact of the film and Arshay's story. I also wanted to give a big thank you to Chaz Ebert, executive producer of A Most Beautiful Thing, among many, many hats that she wears, including publisher of RogerEbert.com. She's a huge supporter of independent cinema and also of the Chicago International Film Festival. So thank you, Chaz. I'll have you take it from here.
Thank you, Mimi. Before we go on, I want to introduce our panelists, but I wouldn't be me if I didn't tell you, I love that we all are able to appear like this, but I usually move around a lot when I'm speaking, so please bear with me if I get so excited, because this film, I'm so excited about it and about our panelists. So if I'm moving around a lot, I hope that I'm not. I hope that you're able to still see me. Let's introduce our esteemed panelists. First of all, Representative Danny K. Davis of the 7th Congressional District in Illinois. We also have Arne Duncan, former Secretary of Education and the managing partner of the Emerson Collective. We have Michael Stratmanis, Chief Engagement Officer of the Obama Foundation. Hello. We have Mary Mazzio, the film director, and Arshay Cooper, who is the author of the book that started this whole thing and the team captain of the rowing team. Let's see, let me start with Arshay. Arshay, what motivated you to write a memoir about your experience growing up on the west side of Chicago?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, you know, storytelling is the oldest form of education, and there's so many great stories that come out of Chicago that a lot of people don't hear or know about. And I wanted young people, right, who went through some of the things that me and my teammates went through, and in a community that was neglected, that didn't have a lot of resources. I wanted them to show how we navigate through the struggles, and talked about the story of young Black men who showed up at the boathouse every day, who broke their backs, who ripped apart their hands for each other, who learned to swim, who overcame their fears, who traveled, and many years later came back to the place and became entrepreneurs and gave back to the place that gave to them. And I thought it was a very important story to tell. And the second reason is, if you watch the film, Pooh said that when they tore down the YMCA, I ran to the streets. The importance of access, the importance of giving hope, right? And being a part of these communities and these programs that needs, right, more mentors and coaches and teachers. And I thought this story was important to tell and important for the world to hear.
I find it tremendously inspirational. Let's go to the director, Mary Mazzio. How did this film come into being, Mary?
So thank you, and wonderful to see you, Chaz, and wonderful to be here. Someone had told me about this memoir that Arshay had self-published, and I remember thinking at the time, there's a rowing team on the West Side, like, you know, is this fake news? I need to go check this out. And so I found Arshay's book on Amazon, read it in a single sitting, and rocketed a tweet out at Arshay Cooper, compelling read. And a tweet came back within, you know, a nanosecond, and it was Arshay. And I think my phone rang maybe a half an hour later, and it was Arshay. What Arshay reminded me last week, which is just hilarious, is that he didn't just tweet to me, he was tweeting to Arshay, remind me, right? You were tweeting to Steven Spielberg, Will Smith, and apparently I was the only one that picked up the phone. And how lucky for me, how lucky to be part of this journey that Arshay has really pioneered.
I happen to think that poverty and lack of opportunity is a health crisis. Arne, you appeared and you talked specifically about the issues that are being discussed today, namely structural impediments and violence facing citizens in places like the West Side of Chicago. And you say in the film, the rough hard number that violence costs our city is about $4 billion a year. If more of the victims looked like me, looked like you, if more of the victims lived downtown, this would not be tolerated. It would not be acceptable. Can you speak to the profound issues around inequality of safety?
Well, I think it's not just inequality of safety, it's inequality of healthcare, it's inequality of access to capital, it's inequality of access to, you know, high quality education. And there, unfortunately, in our city and across the country, there is an acceptable loss of life. And, you know, I was trying to be real honest, we're having a very, very tough year. We had a horrific night last night here in Chicago. I got to go out and go deal with that once I get done with this call. But despite how tough things are, I'm always hopeful because I know what's possible. Arshay is an extraordinary, extraordinary man. He's a natural born leader. He's the glue. Without him, there isn't a story. Kenny Alpart was a different thinker. Without him, there is no story. I always say it's relationships that change lives, not programs. What we have been unwilling to do as a city and the country is provide these kinds of opportunities at scale. And rowing isn't for everybody. There's no one simple answer. But we need, whether it's rowing, whether it's chess, whether it's robotics, whether it's drama, whatever it might be, we have to have a menu of options that young people can choose from and find their interest and find their passion. And yet we refuse to do that. And so that the cost, I mean, we can talk about the economics of it all day long. That's important to understand. But the loss of potential and the amount of fear and trauma that young people are growing up with, it's extraordinary. You know, this film is, you know, a couple, you know, 2 decades old now, maybe, the story. And things arguably are tougher now than they were when these guys were in high school. Arshay's incredible. But there are lots and lots of young men and young women on the South and West Sides, similarly gifted, similar heart for the community, similarly wanting to help out. And it's our, you know, it's just, it's a travesty that we have been unwilling to make the commitments to let them flourish and bloom and lead us to a safer city. That's exactly what he's done. We need to do that at scale.
Great, yes. I remember back when I was in high school, reading an article in our, I think back then there were like maybe 4 daily newspapers, but I don't remember which one, but I remember specifically reading this article that talked about Crane High School. And I picked up the newspaper. I was very eager to read about what I thought was going to be something positive. And it was a negative article that almost described the students at my school as animals. I was so pretty traumatized by it because the students that I saw every day, the teachers that I saw every day, the potential that I saw in the kids that I played with and went to school with every day was nothing like what I read into the newspaper. And so one thing that I like about this film is that it starts allowing us to take back the narrative about how we are going to define ourselves. And that's what Arshay does and what Mary does and what all of the guys in the movie do. And I love that. My next question is actually for you, Mike Stratmanis. The outcomes for some young Black men living in places like the West Side seem really limited, but can you speak to those limitations and the work you're doing at the Obama Foundation to help improve those outcomes?
Sure. First of all, I really want to just underscore what Arne laid out. The human potential that is lost every day. Let's put aside horrible nights like last night and the violence that is kind of ripping through our city right now. I think this film really shows the hurdles and the obstacles that our fellow Chicagoans that live in the West Side, that live in the South Side, have to overcome without a safety net, without second and third chances, the generational trauma, what happens when you live in a community where you don't have parks to go play at, where you don't have healthy food to go eat and bring into your home, where you don't have access to an education that can give you a broad set of opportunities. And so, you know, at the Obama Foundation, we're leading the work of the My Brother's Keeper Alliance. And this was something that was started after the death of Trayvon Martin, the murder of Trayvon Martin in Florida, when President Obama said from the White House that Trayvon could have been my son. And I think what we really want to try to bring, there are all kinds of things I can give you, but what we really want people to understand is that these are our sons, these are our daughters, these are our brothers, these are our sisters, and that there is so much that they have to offer us. And I think the film really shows us this, right? That from resilience to problem solving, to teamwork, to leadership, we can learn from these people that are our neighbors, that are with us. And so, you know, we are working on issues around systemic poverty. We are working on the opportunity for mentorship. One of the things that you see in the film is, Chaz, you know, I know your story. I know Arne's story, Mary, Arshay, others. I'll tell you my story. I'm here because someone saw something in me and became a mentor to me at school, at work. And so we want to give young people the opportunity to have the kind of mentors that can show them opportunities for them to live their dreams. And so, you know, investing in our city, investing in the young people in particular that have that potential is something that is a priority for us at the Obama Foundation, as well as bringing this small thing, the Obama Presidential Center, to the South Side of Chicago, bringing the world to celebrate everything that's great about our community.
That's terrific. I want to ask The director, Mary, what surprised you most about the making of this film or the whole project?
I think there were two things really. And the first was when Arshay and Alvin met me at the airport and said, we're going to take you on a ride around. This is before we started filming. And you better not bring your Red Sox baseball cap. You better bring a baseball cap, but not, it better sure as shit never be from Boston. So I show up with an unmarked cap, and Arshay and Alvin, we start driving from the airport and we approach the West Side. And what really blew me away, if you're not from neighborhoods like the West Side, actually experiencing the topography, where one block might be gangster disciples and 2 blocks over are the vice lords. And I remember turning to Arshay and saying, so let's go from your house to school. And Arshay would point out the different territories. And then he said, so this was a treacherous way. He said, there was one other way to get to school. And we went that way. And he said, oh, by the way, this is doubly treacherous. And I said, well, how did you get to school safely? And he's like, I pretty much answered your question. There was no such thing as a safe way to get to school. And what really clicked for me was that when young people affiliate, it is for protection, it's for survival. And otherwise there is no safe way. And young people are making these decisions at ages 10, 11, and 12. And I think that was most surprising. The second thing that really kind of shocked me was when Arshay's mother and when Malcolm's mother started talking about the intergenerational nature of trauma and how slavery, or let's call it what it is, right? White domestic terrorism is maybe a generation away, maybe 2, and how profoundly that trauma, and now we know there's new research, of course, right? That it can be passed down epigenetically, and how that trauma is so debilitating, and not just to a family, but to a community. And we as a greater society, we have been derelict. We created the conditions for neighborhoods like this. And I think, as Arne said earlier, there has been no political will about remedying what needs to be remedied.
That brings me back to Arshay. Well, first of all, before I get to you, Arshay, I have to acknowledge Representative Danny Davis is here with us now. Hello, thank you for coming. And I'm going to get to Arshay and then a question for you. Arshay, you know, what Mary says makes me think that this film sort of peels back layers of both trauma and intergenerational trauma. Can you speak to the trauma? I have to tell you, I was very moved by your mother and your family. And Malcolm's mother experienced, your grandfather experienced firsthand, and the impact that you believe it had on their children and their children's children. We forget about intergenerational trauma, and that's really important.
Yeah, you know, one of our producers said that, you know, whenever there's a mass shooting in a suburban school, right away they send in a bunch of trauma counselors. And I remember saying to myself, wow, I see this every day. I skipped over pools of blood. I heard gunshots when I sleep. We lost friends. We lost teammates to gang violence. And I don't remember seeing anyone or talking to anyone. And I remember being young and asking, why is my mother a drug addict? Why are my brothers in gangs, and decisions that they made for survival, you know? And talking to my family, my grandmother who's still alive and well, who picked cotton, who my grandparents seen their friends hung on a tree in the South, the trauma that it did to them, that Malcolm's brother who was hung on a tree in the South and came to Chicago for a better life, right? And they have never talked to anyone about this trauma, didn't know how to deal with this trauma. And you know, my grandmother explained that he turned to alcohol to deal with that, to not feel anymore. And my mother had to pay for his trauma, right? And the only thing that was there was the liquor stores on the corner for her, and drugs. And that's where she went to cope, to not feel. And here's my generation. And to hear that is painful, you know, and, you know, that's something that I think about every day. And that's something that I wish I learned early on in life, that we can talk to someone, that we can just speak out. And it's not a mental health crisis, a health crisis. And I think it's very important that we put more trauma counselors and social workers in our school to help us deal with this, because we have dealt with most soldiers have dealt with in war, but before we were 13 years old, we've seen the same things. And, you know, and I know there's a lot of treatment for some of those guys, but it wasn't for me and my brothers. And so that's the thing that I had to grow up with. And thank God that I had a sport that took me to the water just to meditate every day for 2 hours, to just step away and finally collect my thoughts.
You know, you bring up a very important point, and Representative Davis, actually, you're a psychologist by training. Can you speak to the new research that's been done about untreated trauma and how it's passed down epigenetically, and what does untreated trauma do to a community?
Well, let me just say that I'm delighted that I made it over. As a matter of fact, we're voting. And then, of course, we have a tribute coming up to the most saintly person I've ever known, John Lewis, a little later. So it's just good to see the group. Of course, I've had great opportunity to work with Michael over the years, also with Arne over the years. Arshay, it's good to see you. It's good to hear the discussion that is taking place. Trauma has become such an essential part of living in inner city America. And unfortunately, it's not just inner city America. Quite frankly, it's all over America. And it's in many places throughout the world. And since it has become an integral part of life, then obviously we need to devote more time, more attention, and fortunately, some of that is beginning to happen. It's unfortunate that it took certain tragedies to make it happen, to cause it to happen. But Senator Durbin and I actually have a bill that we introduced some time ago called Trauma-Informed Care. I introduced it in the House. Senator Durbin introduced it in the Senate. And we must have had at least 200 different groups and organizations who stood with us when we introduced it. Hopefully, that's going to become a greater part of our basic approach to dealing with the after impact of trauma. But the real deal is we need to do so much more to prevent trauma from occurring and taking place. I've been delighted to see the film and to know what it does. Of course, Manley is one of the small schools in our community. It was always in the shadow of Crane and Marshall and Farragut and Collins. And so to see Manley break out and we see what took place and what could take place. And so to see that and to know that, and know that no matter what the circumstances and how difficult they are, and they can be, there is a rainbow at the end of the cloud, and people have the potential and the ability to come together, to function as a group, to do team building, to do camaraderie building, and do all of those things that have come about as a result of what was taking place and what was happening. So I'm just delighted that it's happened at Manly, that it came from the neighborhood where I live and work, and from people that I know and have been engaged with and worked with. So I'm excited, seriously excited about it.
Thank you, Congressman. Arne, you're working on the issue of gun violence in Chicago. Can you speak to that, and what structural changes need to happen to address some of the systemic roots of that violence?
I guess the other way to ask that question is what doesn't need to change. So, you know, if you talk about social distancing, that's a new term, but these communities on the south and west sides have been socially distanced for decades. And so when you have an absence of jobs in the legal economy, when you have food deserts, when you have an absence of health care, when you don't have investment, guess what? You're going to have higher crime rates. And so that's just the reality. And again, that's something that has been acceptable. And we can, you know, we can all say Black Lives Matter, we can all march, we can do that kind of stuff. But I look at people's actions more than I look at their words. And the truth is, the hard truth is there has been an acceptable loss of life in Chicago, primarily of young Black men for a long time. And that's sort of been okay. And, you know, we're in a tough spot now, but it's interesting. The city is up now about 38% violence this year. We had 3 years of declines. So it's a really, really, really hard time. But the community where we've worked the hardest for the past 4 years, or we're the deepest, Rosen out south, we're actually down 38%. So the city's up 38%, we're down 30%. So what's different? We have amazing outreach teams. We talked a lot about, you know, counseling, having someone to talk to. We have a clinical team that's extraordinary, so guys can work through a lifetime of trauma. We have life coaches. A lot of our guys, frankly, have served a lot of years in jail. We always say experience can be the best teacher, but it doesn't have to be your experience, it can be somebody else's teacher. We have an educational team that helps guys get high school diplomas. We have a set of guys going to college now. We have a jobs team. And so you sort of think about what we've tried to build over the past 4 years. You basically have 5 adults for every single one of our young men. You have an outreach worker, you have a clinician, you have a life coach, you have the education tutor, and then you have the jobs coach. You think about that intensity of intervention. It's not cheap, but we're seeing, you know, we still have really tough times. It's not like we've cracked this code by any stretch. We're making mistakes every day. But if you provide that kind of network of support, a lot of our guys who have been shot, a lot of our guys, frankly, who have done more than their fair share of shooting, they're leading the city to a better place. I would say they're the solution to the problem. They're not the problem. You're the opener today. I don't want to jump in, but a real question for Arshay is like he was a born leader. He's a born bridge builder. And when his friend was struggling to go to school, he'd go pick him up every single morning. You know, it's a crazy thing to get in a boat. It's a really crazy thing to ask police to get in the boat with you. I mean, the police are the enemy. I just curious, just watching the movie, just where those skills, where did that come from? And then the larger thing for me is how do we identify those Arshays across the city and help them lead us to where we need to go? He would have been a hell of a gang leader. He would have built some coalitions. He would have done some stuff. He would have been a dangerous man on the street, but he went a different way. So a question, I guess, you know, not to jump in, but really, where did those skill sets come from? And then how do we systemically, how do we identify those young men and put them in a position, not just to lead themselves, he led a community, he led a set of his friends to a better place. How do we do that at scale?
And you know, and I am going to go right to Arshay with your question, because one of the things that I've noticed since the brutal murder of George Floyd and sort of an awakening of the consciousness, not just in the United States, but across the world, an awakening and more of an acknowledgement of racism and the traumatic effects of it economically, health-wise, you know, in every way. This film really brings home the thing that you mentioned about Arshay going to pick up his friend and taking him to school every day. is one of the things. But the other thing that is incredible that I couldn't believe when I saw this film is that not only did Arshay start rowing with some team members who didn't even know how to swim in the beginning, later they actually taught the Chicago Police Department, some members of the Chicago Police Department, to swim. I couldn't believe it. Arshay, I think that the questions that Arne directed to you are things that we really want to hear. Arshay, unmute.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you. Great question, Arne. You know, I think you talk about picking up Alvin. I think that started with my mom, who was a drug addict who went into recovery. And it was Victory Outreach. And what I loved about Victory Outreach, that it wasn't just an organization that worked with the parent. It wasn't just an organization that comes into your neighborhood and just work with the kid. They work with the whole family. And so an organization that was targeting the whole household was special. And to be able to have those conversations as a 13-year-old kid to your mom, and to hear other families tell the story how they made it through, really just touched my heart. It gave me the first sense of hope, right? So I know that if someone reached out to my mom, and I can reach out to someone else. So I think that was like instilled in me, sitting in those meetings every week with my mom as a kid through this church at Victory Outreach. And I think the second thing, that when Ken Alpart came to our school, you know, he did his research on the community. And thank you, Ms. Flanagan, for allowing him to come to our school. And, you know, and he brought in these amazing coaches that were youth development coaches. And, you know, it wasn't just sports, but it was entrepreneurship, right? And there, where we're sitting in those classes a couple times a week, I learned critical thinking. You know, I learned confidence and how to ask for things. And from there, I realized that truly that it takes a village to raise a child. Like Victory Outreach was helping us, but there still was no food at home. So we had to connect to another program, right? And I was okay with that. And I loved my mom. I had no friends. So rowing came to my school, and Ken was there. And I started learning many different things. And I'm 18 years old, and I was on my way to college, and I didn't want to go. I wanted to take a year off. And so I joined City Year. That's where I met Duncan, right? And it was just this village of people that was working to make young Black men and women successful. And I remember building these bridges as a kid, but I remember that everyone, the store owner, the woman at the cleaners, the teacher, the social worker, everyone that I connected with who was a part of raising this village, it was everyone except for the cops. I worked with everyone except for them. I felt like, as a young person, that, you know, everyone in this neighborhood is working with the young people except for these guys who work 8 hours a day in our community. And I felt like it was important for me to know their name, and it was important for them to know my name. And I thought, in the course of filming, we was talking about a lot of the disconnect between different gangs. And I said, oh, wait a minute, the biggest disconnect was between us and the police department, in my opinion. I was a kid who've never been suspended from school, never committed a crime, went to the school every day, pledged allegiance to the flag, went to the baseball game and sung the national anthem with goosebumps in my spine. I, you know, passed the Constitution test, but still had my face pressed down a police car 10 times. 9 or 10 times, had my hands just in my pants looking for drugs. And I thought at first that maybe it was just because my community is rough. And then I started interacting with the private school kids at the boathouse when I became a senior, and to go to their neighborhoods or my Coach Kenny neighborhood and leave, and still ripping over my backpack, asking me, what am I doing in this neighborhood? Am I stealing? And then I realized that there was a problem. And I knew that it was a problem for a long time. And I, you know, there were many different movements in the 60s. It was the way James Baldwin did things. There was the Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam movement. There was the Civil Rights movement. There was NAACP. There was the Black Panthers movement. But my way has always been sports. Has always been a conversation. Has always been the water. And so I wanted to take them back to the same water that these guys from different neighborhoods and different communities didn't get along at first, and how it changed our lives. And I think people will always forget some of their students, but you will never forget a teacher. And I wanted us to be the teacher, a face that they will never forget, right? And we welcome them. And I ran into a lot of bad cops, but these guys were good guys. And we got in the boat and we rode. And I think I said it was a powerful moment when Alvin spent time with one of the cops who was nervous, Big Lou, on the erg machine. He worked with them, and Alvin was locked up, not because he was a criminal, because he's a survivor and a protector. And I wanted the guys just to hear our stories. And I think a mom is usually worried about two things, and that's when their son is in a different neighborhood, or their son interaction with the police. And I wanted to be able to have this conversation with them, and I wanted them to get to know us, know our names, and reunite in this sport. And it was a beautiful moment, and we was able to talk. They asked Alvin to come out to speak. We asked them to make a commitment. If they see a kid on the edge, can you take them to the boathouse? It's free. And those conversations happen, and it had to happen every day through stretching, 2 months of training, being at practice, going to the boathouse, and understanding Preston's story, my story, Alvin's story, and Malcolm's story. And we was able to move forward. And when the last thing I would say is that when George Floyd was killed, to be able to text with them back and forth, for them to be like, this is not right, it showed me that when they saw his face, they saw my face. So when they pull over our kids or have interaction with our kids, that they see our face and our kids' face. And that was important to me. And that was a huge accomplishment to me.
Wow, Arshay, every time you speak, you just take me right to the core. I can barely speak after I hear you. You just are so much of what, what this whole nation is striving for. And you actually bring tears to my eyes. I want to go back to Mike.
I got to follow that. Okay. All right, I'll try.
Because Arshay mentioned something about the differences, the changes that he wants to see take place in society. And over the last several weeks, there has been a greater awakening in America. What sort of changes do you think are necessary to help dismantle structural racism? And what sort of reinvestments in communities like the West Side or the South Side are needed?
Well, I guess the thing I'd say, start off by saying, Chaz, is, I was born in 1969. That was a year after riots ripped through our city and so many other cities. And you look now, if you go and drive through, the tour that Mary took, the work that Arne's doing, the community that Congressman Davis represents and where Arshay is from, so much of it it looks, unfortunately, very much the same as it did after those riots because of the lack of investment. And so we've seen, and I don't want to, discourage anyone who's giving and who's doing charity. Charity is necessary, gifts are necessary, philanthropy is necessary. But I'd say investment is the path that I'd like to see us go in, and more human-centered investment. Because when you listen to what Arshay said, what I hear is people investing in one another, building relationships, building networks. He talked about his journey and the handoffs that went on as he went in every single stage. You talk about what Arne has learned through the work he's done in Roseland about how you needed to surround people. All we're doing is replacing or putting in place what communities like the ones that are in the suburbs of Chicago or in the north side of Chicago have every single day. What those young people have in their lives are supportive people in the schools, family members who help them get jobs, people who make a call when they get in trouble to help them get out of trouble and find another path, mental health resources, doctors that help them along the way, the person who they can talk to help them figure out where do they want to go to high school, where do they want to go to college, how does this summer job going to help you get the next job along the way. That's what that's what Arne and others are investing in. And so, you know, there's a North Lawndale Justice Center that we fund through My Brother's Keeper that's helping people deal with the criminal justice system, reforming it, helping it stay fair, representing them so they have representation so they're not just victims. You know, when I ended up, you know, going to St. Ignatius High School in Chicago and down at U of I, a place where I know you spend a lot of time, Chaz, what I found is when I heard stories from my friends about the things that they did and the way that they got in trouble when they were young people, they had folks come and help them out. They were doing, kids get in trouble. They make mistakes. They rebel. And I think all we want to do in these communities is we want to surround the young people with the same kind of resources that you get if someone believes that you have value, if someone believes you have something to offer your family, your community, our city. And I will tell you, when I look at our city today, when I look at the decisions that we're making and the devastation that COVID-19 is wrecking throughout our city and the human lives and the healthcare, when I look at the economic crisis that we're in, when I look at the violence in our streets, when I look at the work that has to be done, we need more ideas, we need more leaders, we need more communities involved in the game if this city is going to be what it can be in the months and the years to come. And so why would we leave all of these bright, brilliant people on the sidelines and not able to give all that they can to help us get through? They're survivors, they're entrepreneurs, they're hustlers, they know how to work with others. And like Arshay is showing us right now, they know how to lead. And so I think investing in them, centering their voice, and really making them partners. I love charity, but partners in the work, I think, is the place we need to go. And that changes the structure of racism, because what racism brings with it is an assumption that I'm here and you're there because you're Black. An investment in us as humans reduces that, removes that, and frees everyone, right? Both the Black people who have been the victims of that mindset and the folks who are unlocking and blocking their own humanity from that lie, through that lie. And so that's the direction I would ask us to go. And I'm talking to myself, I'm preaching to myself as I say that out loud, because there's more work that I need to do.
What you say about partnership is key, because you don't want a hierarchical way to look at this so that somebody's higher, somebody's lower, somebody's asking for a handout. That's not what this is. Investing in communities, investing in people, investing in potential, becoming partners with the outcome so that the young people growing up know that there is hope, that there is a path, whether it's through education, through career, through something, that it's not just through gangs, that there should be protection from families, from communities, from our city, from our state, from our neighbors. So I wanted to ask Congressman Davis, are you still there, Congressman? I think, he has to go back and forth. He's voting on some measures. So let's go to Mary. So this film was scheduled to premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival in March, and you were going to bring it to my Ebert Fest Film Festival down at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana in April. Both of those events were canceled, and so much has changed since then. In what way do you think the film is even more timely now? And what kind of impact, Mary, do you want this film to have for its viewers?
You know, Chaz, I think at first, you know, we were dealing with COVID and we were so disappointed when South by was canceled. And then we had our theatrical release that was similarly delayed and delayed and delayed. And yet, I think certainly the story and voices of these young men, Arshay and Alvin and Pookie and Preston, remind us, as both Arne and Michael have said, that, you know, talent is equally distributed. It's access and opportunity that are not. And that's fundamentally un-American, right? The starting line for a young child growing up in these neighborhoods is, there is no starting line, right? And that is, again, it's fundamentally undemocratic. And I think from an impact standpoint, we're seeing an amazing reawakening generally. And certainly within the sport itself, we're seeing great philanthropy open up, which becomes really interesting for two reasons. One, when you look at sort of corporate chieftains or captains of industry, many of them have been educated at Harvard or Exeter or Groton and Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Many of them have rowed. And in fact, our sport is counts among really the most privileged. And Arshay's leadership has been exceptional, and we're seeing tremendous philanthropy open up. In fact, our friends at FILA are going to be dropping a Most Beautiful Thing shoe. There's a new fund to support Arshay's work nationwide, a Most Beautiful Thing Inclusion Fund. But I think the bigger impact goes back to what Michael said, and I love that term, human-centered investment. I think that as this reawakening is happening, I'm certainly hearing in some of the previews that we've heard around the film, you know, there's a reminder of who lives in these neighborhoods and what conditions created those neighborhoods. And again, the collective obligation to reinvest. And what does that look like? It's going to be hard, it's going to be messy, but it simply has to be done. And again, if this film and really Arshay and his leadership can contribute to that dialogue, you know, game over.
I think we have time for some questions from the audience. Thank you so much for all of you who have joined in to join us today, who logged in to join us today. Before I go to the questions, I think you're going to, that the host is going to feed me some of the questions so I can see them here. But before we go to the questions, it's important to me to say this. When we talk about problems and issues and how to solve them, so much is centered on the negative. And the thing that one of the reasons that I wanted to really support this film is I saw the hope. I saw the optimism. When I met Arshay in person and when I heard about what he's doing around the country with young people and rowing, it just, you know, I cheered. And so the thing that I don't want to give an impression that it's all gloom and doom. There's a tremendous amount of satisfaction in doing this work and making an investment in the communities and doing the human-centered investment. And I wanted either any of you, Mike, Arne, Arshay, to speak to that hope and that optimism.
Well, you know, as the person who works for Barack Obama, I guess I'll start. You know, there is, I agree with you, Chaz. It was the thing about the film that really struck me because there was, all I saw were obstacles. All you saw were challenges. And Mary and Arshay and the subjects of the film did a really great job of telling their own stories, being upfront about the mistakes that they made, the regrets that they had. But they, you know, always had hope for the next day. And I think that we talk too much, and I have to always check myself on this, about these communities, our fellow communities, our brothers and sisters, as victims. And that victimization language is really one that it's a very passive perspective on who's there. And it really, frankly, more than anything, kind of places the communities and the folks in there in a position of weakness. And what I see in this film is nothing but strength. And if somebody is strong and someone has experiences that will lead them forward, then really all they need are resources to be able to take things forward. And if you look at it that way, then it turns the conversation. It starts from an individual discussion, which I think this film does such a great job of, and film does a great job of. It starts you with the individual, but then it takes you to the structural, because you have to ask why these resources aren't there. And this kind of victim mentality kind of keeps you a little stuck in the sense of these individuals and what's wrong with them, and oh, it's so terrible, and this, that, and the other. But the structural questions, and Arne, maybe you want to talk about this because you're showing it every day. These structural questions, yes, they're expensive. Yes, they're complex. They're not simple, but they're not intractable. It's not like we can't actually answer them and get to them and get through them. And I think you're showing that with an investment and with a path, you can give people the resources and the tools to be able to, live the lives that you want them to live. And these are boys and young men of color that today are on the bottom of every statistic you would want, and on the top of every statistic that you wouldn't want, that can be turned around.
Arne? Mute.
Sorry about that. I say I don't have much to add. It's an amazing story. Mary's an amazing storyteller. It's inspiring, but honestly, there's nothing surprising about it. Had there been a rowing team dropped into any one of the other, 100 high schools in Chicago, you would have also had an extraordinary story. And I think that's the part that people don't understand, is that the talent, the leadership, the resilience, the grit, the sense of community, that exists everywhere. And what's missing, as Mary said, what's missing is the opportunity or the range of opportunities. And it's an extraordinary story. There's stories like this all over the city. They just don't get told. This one needed to get told, but this is less, way less than 1% of those stories that should be told. This one, we just happen to have the good fortune of a unique story, and someone with some filmmaking skills who was a pretty good rower herself, and it just sort of all came together.
Yeah, I'd say if people want to know what to do, follow what happened here, where someone decided they saw what worked for them, and decided to bring it to others. If it worked for you, it'll probably work for somebody in these communities. And I love how Arne talks about the range of opportunities, because for some it's film, some it's photography, some it's rowing, some it's math, but the range needs to be.
So we have two questions from our audience that sort of go hand in hand. I'm going to read them both, and then you can decide who's going to answer them. From Thomas Domo, he asks, the film has a tremendous message of persistence and unity in the face of this pandemic, which separates us, and mounting civil unrest. How do we continue to act on the teachings of this film? And I'm going to get to the second question, and then we can answer. The second question is from Ben Quick. He says, the connection between the Manly crew and the Chicago Police Department was eerily prescient considering the timing of the film's release and the challenges we are living through of police versus activism. Has a bond formed between the filmmakers and the film subjects and the Chicago Police Department been carried forward? What are the next steps? What can those of us in the rowing communities with police relationships learn from you that we might not know? The second question is more for Arshay.
I answered the second question from Ben Quick from Springfield, Mass. Yeah, I think you know, it's for me. It again, it goes back to relationships, right? It's the rowing community partner. When I go to these cities, and I'm helping these programs build a framework, it's really, you know, you have to partner with the church. We have to partner with the business owner. We have to partner with the schools and help their kids graduate high school, right? And, you know, it's the leadership deciding to just take on what are the challenges in your community, right? And start attacking it. You know, the thing about Ken, you know, he's like, I want to go to the neighborhood that no one wants to go, right? And not only give my treasure, but my time and my talent. And I think that's, as a rowing community, that's what we can do, and educate ourselves before we go into this community. Not what you think they need, but what's needed, and talk to the folks who've been living in that community, has been serving in that community for so many years, and listen and ask them what they need, and do that going forward. And I know that, you know, there, like Arne said, there are many different things, but for me, I know when I was out in that water that, you know, nothing against any sports, that I couldn't do comeback sports. You know, football made me want to hurt somebody because of the way I grew up. You know, playing basketball, I wasn't that good, so I would hear that I'm garbage or I suck, and I heard that stuff all the time growing up at home, you know, and so it didn't work for me. So being in the water was just like, you know, that magical rhythm, you know, the sound of the oar splashing the water, and just being able to see downtown up close, which I never had in my 15 years of growing up in Chicago, was special. And I think, you know, the rowing community offer different things that other sports don't. You know, you race one time in your city, and then every other year you race, every other race you're racing somewhere else. So I think to do your part is really just going to the schools that need that particular sport. If you can't go to all of them, but what school kind of needs your sport the most, the access to travel, working out, or maybe the school don't have a lot of sports, go to that school. Maybe the kids who don't make it on the basketball and football team, I want to talk and meet with them the moment they don't make the team, you know? And I think you go into the police station the same way. I reached out to them and say, you know what, sports unite people, and ask them to come out for a row. I knew I couldn't mail my book to the police station, they would read it. I knew I couldn't hold up a sign and they might see it. I knew I couldn't march to the police station with a horn and they may hear me. But if I can say, hey, come out to row, come out just for, you know, just to do some sports, and then the conversation happens. And then the unity is formed. And so sports have always united people. And I would say just use the sport to have a good time, and then let's have those conversations.
I have one last question. I see that we're a little bit over time, but this one is to Arshay. Vondell Singleton says, thanks Arshay for your leadership and being there for a friend in time of need. What's next for you in terms of extending this story to other platforms and the plans you have in expanding rowing and other solution-based outreach to inner city youth?
Yes, we just started a Most Beautiful Thing Fund, right? And that fund supports my work. So I teamed up with the Pocock Foundation in Seattle, who knows rowing, who spent years of taking what they know best in the sport and putting them into schools. And we're picking cities, right? I spent the last 6 years going into a city, helping them recruit, helping them fundraise, working with parks, making sure they have a dock and they have a boat, and connecting with like Hudson, connecting with Concept T, who makes the erg. We have all these people surrounded around our project who make boats, who make ergs, who work with parks, who knows how to get in schools. And we're taking this framework and this vision and this mission and this idea that Ken had started many years ago into the schools and many cities in our country. And so that's what I'm working on now. I have a team. Mary has been killer at raising money and help putting this this idea to work. And
yeah,
so and it's in the framework. It's putting kids on the water, connecting them with college coaches. Now there's so many college coaches that say, I want to diversify my team, right? But that's where we come in. We go to the high school and say, there's an opportunity here. We give them the academic support. We have social emotional learning. We do whatever it takes to make sure the kid get that opportunity and get those scholarships that are sitting there. And yeah, that's what I'm working on, and I'm excited about it. And just to say, Chicago, there's Chicago Training Center on the south side, the Chicago Rowing Foundation on the north side, and there's the Lincoln Park Lagoon right there. And they reached out to me. They have seats available when COVID's over for young people to come to the boathouse and experience it. And I'm excited to really help navigate that with them.
I can't go past that Lincoln Park Canal Lagoon without thinking of you and thinking of this movie. I want to thank all of you today who joined us for the question and answers, and thank you to our panelists, Mary Mazzio, the director, Mike Stratmanis of the
Don't catch a crab.
Arne Duncan of the Emerson Collective, Congressman Danny Davis, who had to go vote, and especially to you, Arshay Cooper. Thank you so much. And I have, let me see, the film opens July 31st, and you can go to the website. The website is amostbeautifulthing.com. Good night and take care.